Arizona passing the most comprehensive state immigration bill in U.S. history last week. Critics like the ACLU, La Raza, and other liberal think tanks saying it's a slap in the face to civil rights. J.D. Hayworth is running for Senate in Arizona and thinks the new law is just what his state needs to combat a growing illegal immigration problem. He joins us now from Phoenix. J.D., your opponent on the GOP side, Senator John McCain, made a surprising statement recently. I think he said the state acted out of frustration. Are you surprised? I thought Mr. McCain was really hard on illegal immigration.
Well, it's a change for John McCain. You'll recall that 3 years ago he co-sponsored the amnesty bill with the late Ted Kennedy, and obviously that's a major concern for Arizona voters. In fact, the real problem we've seen from official Washington is that it seems that both Republicans and Democrats vacillate between inaction and amnesty. And now John McCain finding me closing in on him in the polls, finding out the fact that 70% of Arizona voters want to see this get tough approach, now suddenly says, oh, this is the right thing to do because people are frustrated. Well, yeah, that's really an understatement.
Well, J.D., I think, like Hispanics like myself, we're also against illegal immigration. I mean, just speaking from personal experience, my brother can't get a job in the construction industry because all these construction companies are hiring illegal immigrants at basically low wages, below minimum wage. But the problem is, how do you make sure that these police departments, the police officers themselves, the states, aren't hit with lawsuits? Because I tell you, I mean, if I get asked to prove that I'm an American citizen, I'm going to be ticked off. And why should I be singled out when Eric doesn't have to carry his birth certificate? So that's where I think the problem lies, right there.
Well, Rebecca, you bring up an interesting point, and as I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm thinking about the fact that we both used to be employed by Channel 10 here in Phoenix, and of course I was there long before you were, but do you remember under the Simpson-Mazzoli Act passed in 1986, when I came to work at Channel 10 in Phoenix in 1987, I had to have my birth certificate from Guilford County, North Carolina, to prove that I was a citizen to satisfy the requirements of that law. But the reason I want to mention that is because we backed off from enforcement. President Reagan told us in 1987 that things were going to get tough, and sadly, we moved away from that enforcement component, especially post-1989. But to your point exactly, and I'm glad you raised this, we've heard Governor Brewer and we've heard many law enforcement officials say that as law enforcement professionals, their intent is not to ethnically profile. In other words, when a law enforcement officer is going through a regular day, dealing with a variety of suspicious acts, there has to be a reasonable suspicion. They're not going to come up, if you come back, Rebecca, or your brother's out on the street, they're not going to come up and say, your papers, please. That's a mischaracterization of what's going on, and really an old B movie from way back when. No, in the real world, there has to be reasonable suspicion, and sadly, when you see about 60 people packed into the back of a van, guess what? There's reasonable suspicion in that situation, isn't there?
All right, J.D., let's talk about this. Is a state-to-state, state-by-state issue, immigration laws. What do the people of Arizona want?
Well, Eric, again, let's understand something where there may be broad agreement. The fact is, Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, and when you take a look at the U.S. Criminal Code, if memory serves, I believe it's Article 8, Section 1325, makes it illegal for aliens to come into the country unauthorized. So what has really not happened is that the federal government has really failed to secure the border, has failed to protect the American citizens. Again, 5 years ago, when I was a member of the House of Representatives, I sponsored the Enforcement First Act that in many ways Senate Bill 1070 here in Arizona mirrors. The foundation of it is to enforce existing law. But the premise of your question is quite correct in terms of this fact. As long as Washington, D.C. refuses to enforce immigration law, then the states will fill that vacuum, and that's exactly what has happened here in Arizona.
J.D., so how do you get over all the lawsuits? Even the mayor of Phoenix says that he's going to challenge this law. He thinks it's a terrible law. It's going to be divisive because Arizona, especially Phoenix, as you know, has a huge Hispanic population. I mean, legal Hispanic population. So
sure.
how do you mount
exactly
against the lawsuits?
Well, again, what's going on here, Rebecca, and let's understand this, and certainly you pointed it out earlier, I call it the myth of the monolith. The notion that anybody with a Hispanic surname instantly wants open borders and amnesty. As you know, nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
And with the mayor of Phoenix, I think this is incredibly regrettable that Phil Gordon, who in the recent past has seen no fewer than 3 Phoenix police officers gunned down by illegal aliens, that he reflexively takes up the point of view that somehow this law is unfair. Certainly Phil Gordon understands that we have trained professional law enforcement officials in a variety of law enforcement agencies, and they will act with care to deal with this. Sadly, I think Phil Gordon's becoming part of the problem instead of part of the solution. And again, that goes back to my opponent, John McCain, in this Republican primary. He has accepted the endorsement of Phil Gordon. I think the time is now for John McCain to repudiate the notion that Phil Gordon should even think about filing a lawsuit about this.
All right, J.D., we have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
By the way, tell my friends over there at Channel 10, Fox 10 News, that I said hello. That we said hello. Happy hour.
You bet I will.
All right.
You bet I will. Hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, J.D.